Welcome to AI Tools for Practicing Lawyers, practical, no-nonsense guidance to help attorneys put AI power to work in their practice right now.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI Tools for Practicing Lawyers. I'm Ron Drescher,
I'm Heather Gardner.
and today we're going to talk about prompting and the prompt method every lawyer should know. Lawyers know how to structure thinking. We learned it for the bar exam. There's a great mnemonic, IRAC, issue, rule, analysis, or application, depending upon when you took the bar, and conclusion. And there is a similar kind of approach that you can take to prompting. Prompting is the secret sauce that helps you get the most out of AI. Today, we're going to talk about something that's, in my view, the heart and soul of using AI as a lawyer, which is really how you talk to it. So the reason it's the heart and soul is because the quality of your interaction determines the quality of your thinking partner. And I don't know about for you, Heather. I know this is true for you because we've talked about it. For me, as much as anything else, ChatGPT is a thinking partner for me.
Absolutely.
We brainstorm. I push back on things. AI will say something, and I'll say, no, I don't think that's fair. I think there's a broader way of looking at it. And of course, ChatGPT being what it is, it always backs down and always finds a way to agree with me, which is not always totally desirable. But once you understand that that's its behavior, you can frame your interactions to get the most out of it. So we're going to have a series of that I call the Prompt Strategy Series. We're going to apply prompting to real law practice situations. And we're going to start with marketing. I've got a multi-episode series in the roadmap that will deal with email marketing, social media marketing, creating content, cleaning up your list, using video, AI video for your marketing, return on investment analysis. There's so many things you can talk about regarding marketing, getting that phone to ring or that email to land or that, intake box to get filled out online. And I'm very excited for that because there's not a lawyer in the land that doesn't want to know how to get more cases. We're also going to talk about client intake prompts, document review, drafting legal work, which if you go on social media, that's what lawyers who are on Flintstones level think that's all that AI is. It's just an opportunity to get into trouble by having the machine draft pleadings with phony citations for you. And as we both know, it is so much more than that, even law firm administration. But before we do any of that, we need a framework for how lawyers should actually communicate with AI. So Heather, when you're sitting down with your AI, and by the way, I hope I'm not outing you on this. You have a name for your AI, don't you?
Yeah, mine's Bosley.
Is that because you relate to Charlie's Angels?
Yeah, I think it was nostalgic for me that my ChatGPT reminded me of that robotic voice, that computer-like voice that you never see, but you
Right.
really need help from all the time.
Right. Well, you told me you have a friend who calls her bot Chatty G.
Mhm.
And I think I've told about 20 people that.
Yeah, it's really cute. It's actually Rhonda Pendergrass who owns The Attorney Whisperer. She is The Attorney Whisperer. She does law firm consulting and a lot of really cool services for attorneys. But yeah, she told me she calls her Chatty G.
We may want to have her on the show one
Yeah,
time. I
absolutely. She
think she'd
uses
have
that
a
for
lot of value to add.
everything. Yep.
All right. So the framework, the IRAC metaphor or analogy in prompting is RTCF. Doesn't roll off the tongue, but it's there. And R stands for role, T is task, C is context, and F is format. And I think it's worth breaking down. First of all, role. And by the way, this is not rocket science, and it's not something I made up. It's around. If you're spending time on social media and you see the influencers that I call the prompt bros, they're talking about that. Yeah, 40 prompts that you can use to make $10,000 a month in an hour a week. That's what you're seeing on social media. So they start with role. And, role is where you say you're opposing counsel. What arguments would you make against this motion? Or you're a bankruptcy trustee. What issues would concern you in this filing? You're a judge. What weaknesses do you see in this argument? You're a mediator. Write this brief to reduce conflict. Now, I think that these really do enhance functionality, but I think it's an optional thing. Most of the time, when you're interacting with the AI knows what you're meaning and who you are and what you're trying to say. If you've built up any kind of relationship with the AI, which is a little creepy when you think about it, but if you have, it knows you. It knows how you think. It knows how you talk. It knows what's important to you. So you don't need to tell it the role because it knows you. It's just going to go ahead and answer the way that it thinks you should. You are interested in it. But if you want to get that enhanced functionality, add a role. You're a stockbroker. Advise me on these stocks. I don't trade based on AI information, but apparently a lot of people do. So that's role. Do you ever do that? Do you ever say, I'm a bankruptcy lawyer and I'm considering, hiring a paralegal service. What are 10 things that I should look out for?
I do ask AI things like that. I go on, for instance, I told you I just downloaded Claude, and I recently went on Claude and asked it to recommend virtual bankruptcy paralegal services to see if it would talk about me, and it did not. So I also found out that Claude cannot look at websites the same way that GPT can that day because it asked for my website. So I put it in. Then it told me it can't really access the website. It told me exactly what it wanted me to copy paste to give it. And then it gave me a really glowing recommendation for my company after I copy pasted what it wanted from the website into it.
By the way, that's a segue for another episode that's on the roadmap, which is lawyers freaking out. Like lawyers used to freak out when they weren't on the first page of Google.
Mhm.
Now they freak out if they're not in an AI output.
Well, but one thing it did recommend was looking at organizations like NACBA. So that would lead attorneys to me. I do have a
Right,
presence there and have had, market with them and things like that. So, and I'm in a lot of the listservs. Lawyers do find me through those.
right. And then some lawyers like me find you from cold emails.
You're still the only one ever. Truly, you are. You're still my only client that I ever got from a cold email.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
Cold emails are so hard. I mean, if you get a 10th of 1% from a cold email, count yourself lucky.
Mhm.
Okay, so then the next part of the mnemonic is task, which is really straightforward, but I mean, ChatGPT thinks it's underutilized. And here's another kind of interesting thing about these AI bots. If you develop a relationship with it where you're, stress testing ideas and thoughts and brainstorming, it's actually a very solitary activity, although it doesn't feel that way. And I picture this time in the not too distant future where people are even less connected with each other than they're becoming now because of social media algorithms, because they're talking all the time with their AI bot. And, I'm not going to say it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I think it's a thing that's going to happen.
I think it's already happening. I've heard
Yeah.
people using it as therapists.
Yes. People do use it as therapists, which I am grateful is way beyond the lane of this podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I would
We're
not
not,
want to do that.
we're not going to be talking about using AI as a therapist, but the tasks, not just, okay, draft a motion or draft a segment of a motion or summarize a document, but let's get a little bit more specific in what we want the AI to do. Turn these notes into a timeline. Identify missing information in this file, which I think is a really great idea.
Mhm.
If you've got a file and you're getting ready to take depositions or do discovery and you've got some notes, like, what am I missing? What am I missing? Right? That's the one thing when you're doing a deposition. You think you're finished, and then you take a break and you go outside with your client and you say, do you have any questions? What haven't we covered? Right? Because you want the client to be your second set of eyes. But really, AI is a much better second set of eyes
Mhm.
than your client. And frankly, by the time you're done with the deposition, it might be a little too late to fill in the gaps. All right. Compare two documents for inconsistencies. Simplify this explanation for a non-lawyer, which also comes into play on the format side. I mean, I'll look at an academic article that I want to read, and it's just going to give me a headache. And so I ask the ChatGPT to kind of 200 words that an eighth grader would understand. And ChatGPT is very good at that. You know, I mean, for example, why don't you just written this great brief, you're going to send it to the client, let the client understand it in lay terms. All right, simplify this explanation for a non-lawyer, convert this into a checklist or workflow. So these are all kinds of things you could ask the AI when you're prompting. The more specific and creative you are with the task, the more useful the output is going to be. So that's the task. Straightforward, but there's always surprising nuggets here and there. Now, here's the part of it that I like the most, which is context, which is the guts of prompting. Context is every fact you can think of, every document that's in the file, legal frameworks. I love when skeptics go to psychics. They're always going to try to tell the psychic as little as you can, right? To test
Mhm.
to see if that psychic is really a charlatan. And I think there are lawyers who do the same thing with AI. They'll just kind of feed a little bit in and see what comes back, which they're wasting their time by doing that.
Mhm.
Just like the skeptics are wasting their time with the psychics. You're really better off telling the psychic everything, because then the psychic might have a better intuitive connection with the subject and really be able to add value in that reading. Same thing is true with AI. You know, so to me, the context kind of requires a bit of a sub framework. And there's at least three things that you should always consider putting into a prompt if you want it to turn out like a really meaningful outcome. One, source documents, the pleadings, the complaint, motions, if they're relevant, discovery responses, contracts, financials, transcripts, the deed, the trust, the will, all of it. Put it in. Put it in if it's the slightest bit relevant. Then the lawyer can create a factual narrative. The lawyer can create a timeline. A lawyer could dictate key facts, client objectives, the things that are going to matter, because the AI doesn't know what matters, but the lawyer does. So that's another great opportunity for the lawyer to kind of build up the prompt. And then there's legal framing. You could ask the AI to come up with your cause of action or claim for relief, but why not give it to him? You know that this is a negligence claim. You know that you're trying to optimize exemptions. You know that your estate planning client is trying to figure out how to avoid the generation skipping transfer tax. I mean, you know all that stuff. That's for part of your training. Feed it to the AI. Let them know that within the framework of these legal analyses, you want an output. So, all right, this is the last time we're going to use this phrase on the podcast. And the phrase is, this is not garbage in, garbage out. We are banishing that phrase from AI tools for practicing lawyers because it doesn't add anything. It doesn't tell you what to prompt. It doesn't even tell you what not to prompt. So we're cutting out that phrase. And the issue is whether you're giving the AI a usable version of the case, something that's complete, structured, and legally framed. Now, while we're here, I want to reiterate something that we talked about before in the episode where we talked about AI tools in apps you're already using. We talked a little bit about a Jetsons level framework where you put all of your important docs into a folder, whether you're on Gemini or in Copilot, and you just ask the AI to review what's in that folder, which it can do. And so then if you say, yeah, that makes sense, because I want to thin down my prompts. I don't have to upload 10 documents every time I prompt on this case. Build a case file that has all of those things, that has your lawyer notes. You want to update lawyer notes? Update them in that folder. You want to update a timeline? Update them there. You got discovery responses? Put them in there. Create your system, develop a system that is going to make it easier for AI to give you the best possible output. And that, to me, once you're starting to think in those terms, you're on Jetsons level and you're not going back. You'll never go back to the Flintstones level. So context is where you want to spend your most time in prompting so that the AI has the best factual battleground on which to launch its, the bombs that are going to make you win your case. Finally, there's format. Format is, how to tell the AI to deliver the answer. I want bullet points. See, when I get an article, I don't read articles anymore. I take the article, I send a link to ChatGPT, and I say, summarize this article in 150 words and 3 bullet points. And there it is. I have it. So, you want a checklist, you want an email, I want a course. I want a course in training my new associate on how to be a great lawyer. I want an email. I want a legal memo. I want a table. Then you could say, keep it under 150 words, or you might say, I want 5,000 words. Explain it at a client-friendly level. Write it for a senior partner. Translate it into plain English. Translate it to another language. You got another language. This happens a lot, especially with international engagements where, let's say most of the clients, personnel speak English, but maybe you've got 1 or 2 that, not so well. Go ahead and translate your output for their language. Something you can do with AI. I want step-by-step instructions to learn how to do this particular thing. That's all part of the formatting framework. And, this doesn't have to be a rigid structure that you have to do every time. As you move through the Flintstones, Simpsons, Jetsons spectrum of AI fluency, you'll get the shortcuts. You'll get the intelligent and educated shortcuts. So anyway, that's RTCF, role, task, context, format.
Something.
And yes,
Something
right.
that occurred to me as you're reading this is what you're saying is something that attorneys are highly trained to already do in their everyday jobs, right? This is just using it in a different way.
Yeah. So what do you mean? What trained to
I
do in what way?
think that attorneys already have to structure information. They also have to take in, large amounts of information. However they do that, structure it. They have to define issues, communicate it clearly to their clients. Like all of the things that you're talking about you need to do to use GPT carefully. Attorneys are already doing that just in a different way. So
That's
attorneys are
true.
already highly trained to do these things. They're just not used to doing them with a machine.
Right. That's true. That
As a
really is true.
is not plugging something in. It is a conversation, like we talked about last time, to get to the real result you need and want. You often have to talk to your whatever, platform you're using. until you get the right outcome.
And this is the framework that we're going to use for the prompt strategy series, which our mission is always the same. We're going to try to add value to lawyers in their practices. Like, if you're listening to this podcast on your drive home, I want you to take with you something that you can use tomorrow when you get back to the office. Assuming you're not a work-at-home lawyer, which is happening more and more these days. And I think will continue to happen more and more. Okay, so now, I've toyed with the idea of having like a cute little jingle that comes in for the practice signal segment. And then I said, no, we're not going to do that. But it is time for the practice signal, which is real question from lawyers in the wild that reveals a workflow problem in the profession. And this one came from Facebook. And a lawyer in a Facebook group recently asked if anyone could email them a motion to extend the stay from the Southern District of California. That's a great practice signal because lawyers have always relied on each other to get forms, always, from day one. But today, a lawyer could generate that motion in seconds using AI. Now, then, if they want, again, I will never discourage a lawyer from going to the community of other attorneys and getting a shared work product. Do that. You should absolutely do that. And you can, combine that process with going to ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or Perplexity or Copilot or whoever is your bot of choice and asking for that very same thing. Ask it to be jurisdiction specific. Feed it the site, right? We know what the site is. It's like C3, right? Feed it that site, make sure that it refers to the local rules and formatting. And, that's really one of the great things about ChatGPT. It's going to put together a first draft very quickly, very competently, emphasis on the word first, because the lawyer's got to look at it. But, I would always rather edit something that already exists than create it from scratch, which is, of course, the mentality of the lawyer who made that post in the first place. But AI gives you another, probably better way to kind of approach the problem. And this way, look, then what you do is you've got the AI first draft. And then somebody from the Facebook group sends you a DM with a link to a document that they created. Then upload that other document to the AI and say, please, combine what we've done and reconcile the two documents to put together one really clean version. And then that's really the best of all worlds. That's our practice signal for the day. It's an easy way to use AI when you're looking for a form. Does anybody have a form for this? Yeah, AI's got a form for that. All right. But, so now we're going to get to the FSJ, the Flintstones, Simpsons, Jetsons segment. And the point of this segment is to give lawyers who are somewhere on the Flintstones, Simpsons, Jetsons spectrum some information, a tip, a resource to help them level up and move through that spectrum. And it's something we talk about at the end of every episode. If you're on the Flintstones level, and I'm going to try to reinforce what we talked about today as far as prompting goes. The goal is just to get started with the structure. So you're adding something into a prompt box. Maybe you're not super comfortable because you haven't done it more than 3 or 4 or 5 times. And maybe this is the first time you've done it. Then, the tip is before you hit enter, add one more sentence to your prompt explaining what you want. Just one more sentence. So instead of summarize this, say, summarize this in bullet points for a client with no legal background. That's a Flintstones level tip. because, you haven't abandoned your yellow pad. You've still got your receptionist in your front office answering the phone. You still have your probably in-house paralegal preparing your documents, and you decided to stick your little toe into the AI waters. Add another sentence to the prompt. See what it's like. So then there's the Simpsons level, which is, let's start using structure intentionally, which is start using at least two elements, task and format, and begin adding context. If you've been, I create motions here and there, I brainstorm with it, try to ratchet it up a little bit. Use a little more structure in your prompts and first of all, see how that feels and see if it actually improves your output. I think that's a good Simpsons level tip. Just add a little bit more than you're used to adding. And on the Jetsons level, I've already given you my Jetsons level tip, which is, create a folder. Create a folder where you put all of the work that you might conceivably want to upload to AI, including your lawyer notes and timelines and some, client factual issues. Maybe the client sent you a pretty good detailed email about what has happened in their matter. Print that email to PDF and drag it into your for AI folder. And that way you start building a system and a structure that is a little bit more AI comfortable. If you want to get better results from AI, don't necessarily just focus on better prompts, but focus on the better context, which is that sub-framework within the prompt, and come up with usable context that will really amplify your AI output. Heather, any closing thoughts?
Good tips. I'd say I always try to give these same tips, I feel like. So I think for this week, I decided for Flintstones level, I'd say try to start using AI once a day for something simple, just to get yourself more comfortable with it. For Simpsons level, we talked a lot about context and structure today, prompt engineering, start really intentionally learning those things. Even if it's just once a week, I read, for instance, those Blink lists where you can read an entire book and a summary each morning. I read prompt engineering books sometimes. Buy a prompt library like I did when I first started. It is so helpful to teach you how to prompt better. I remember when I thought I would need that every time I used AI, but within just a few months, I didn't need that prompt library anymore. I had used it to learn how to prompt myself by that time.
Are you willing to share that?
Yes, if I can find that first one, I'm pretty sure I can because I shared it with so many people back in 22 and 23 when it was really new. But yes, it's probably very obsolete now because they are month over month at this point, and that was in late 22 or early 23 that I would have bought. The first time I ever sat down and played with ChatGPT was probably late 22 when it was very new. And at first I thought, wow, it's really not as great as I thought. And then I bought that prompt library and realized, no, it was me. It's user error, not the not the product. For Jetsons level, I'd say stop thinking about prompts and start building systems with it. Really do what you were talking about today. Put entire files, build out entire folders. That is very Jetsons level use of AI and extremely effective and time saving.
All right. That's great. Thank you so much, Heather. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
That's it for today's episode of AI Tools for Practicing Lawyers. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.